Welcome. My name is Steffen Pauls and I am the CEO and founder of Moonfare. Henry, it's so great to see you again. Let me start with a personal note. As you know, I spent more than a decade with KKR, and it was really an incredible time in my professional career with so many unforgettable moments. So I'm very delighted to have you here today. A very warm welcome from our end. Look, let me introduce the man, as I always say, who doesn't need any introduction. Henry Kravis. Henry is an iconic figure in the world of finance and private equity. With a career spanning over 5 decades, Henry co-founded the investment firm Kravis Roberts and played a crucial role in pioneering and shaping the entire private equity industry. Through his visionary leadership and relentless pursuit of excellence, Henry has left an incredible mark on the financial landscape. But now let's dive into my questions. Henry, it's almost 2 years since you left your role as a co-CEO of KKR. How has your day-to-day life changed in this time, and what are your priorities at the moment?
Well, first of all, Steffen, great to see you again, and great to see the progress that you're making with Moonfare. Bravo. We had a great relationship when you were with us, and always like to see our alumni go off and be successful. So congratulations to you on what you're doing. So, that's correct. It's almost 2 years now. In October, it'll be 2 years since George Roberts and I were finally promoted. It took 45 years to get promoted. We'd been co-CEOs since the founding of the firm. And then, as fortune would have it, we got this promotion to Co-Executive Chair, and we're as busy as ever. We went through the transition in a very thoughtful and meticulous way. We moved Joe Bay and Scott Nuttall up to co-chief operating officers about 4.5 years before they were finally promoted to become the co-CEO. We started with about 7 people that we thought possibly could end up in the role as co or as individual CEO. And then we eliminated a couple eliminated themselves as they left the firm and wanted to go off and do something else. And so it was a very thoughtful way we went about this. They were then promoted to co-chief operating officers, and every year George and I would give them more and more responsibility and more of the firm to look after. They did a phenomenal job. There was no question about it. And it was not as though we picked 2 people that were not close friends. They are incredibly close friends. They came into the firm at the same time. They'd been at the firm by the time they became co-CEOs, about 25 years each. They were in the same entering class. Their families are very close. And this was extremely important to what we wanted. So today, George and I are still extremely involved with the firm. We have what we call the G4. The G4 is made up of George, myself, Joe, and Scott. We meet regularly to talk about strategy. We talk about the issues at the firm and opportunities as well. And the thing that I find most interesting today is that it frees me up to do some of the things that I enjoy doing. And that is, I very much enjoy mentoring the younger stars that we have at the firm, helping them grow at the firm, helping them set their priorities straight. I also spend a lot of time thinking and working with Joe and Scott on strategy, which is also very important about where are we going with the firm? How can we continue to grow it? And this is very, very important. I'm still traveling as much as ever. In fact, I came back last night from Europe again. I'm in Europe 1 to 2 times a month. I've been to Japan for KKR business twice already since in the last about 9 months. I've been to India once and had quite a few meetings there. And so I'm still as active in that regard because I think it's very important to get out, see the team. They like for George or for me to go meet with prospective CEOs, et cetera. So very important things we're doing. And the only good thing is I don't have to worry if there's a leak in the pipe now. You know, that's up to Joe and Scott. They get to deal with that. And the thing that I also stress, and George does too, and this was extremely important when we chose Joe and Scott, make sure that we maintain the culture of the firm. That, as you know, Steffen, having been here for a long time, that is our DNA. And so I focus a lot on that, talk to people about it a lot, try to help Joe and Scott wherever I can. And it's this partnership approach that has been the trademark of KKR. There's no question about it. Joe and Scott are the CEOs. They run the day-to-day firm, and that's exactly what George and I very much want.
Look, you mentioned, Henry, culture, and really, you know this, during my time at KKR, and I guess so that applies to many, many others and within the KKR family, I was really deeply inspired by the culture you and George have built. And as a founder myself, I did really try to do my very best to transfer and apply a lot of what I've learned to Moonfare, in particular the values behind the culture. And today we are at Moonfare also proud of our culture. Let me ask you, for the benefit of the audience, maybe you could outline a little bit what how you would describe the KKR culture, what it stands for. And for me, equally important, as you have grown the firm together with George, and I saw it when I joined, I think KKR had 3 offices or so tremendously across the globe. How did you maintain the culture in all these different locations with now, whatever it is, 2,000 executives or more across the globe?
Steffen, it's an interesting and thoughtful question because to us, if we lose our culture, our firm is hurt, in my view. So we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about the culture. Let me give you a little history of the culture of how we came to where we are today. So in 1976, when we started the firm, Jerry Kohlberg, George Roberts, and I, with a total of $120,000. I had no money. George had no money. Even though we were young partners at Bear Stearns. Jerry was 19 years older. He had a little money. He put up 100. George and I each put up 10,000. The first conversation was easy. How do we divide the economics? That took about 35 seconds. The second conversation we had the same day was what kind of culture do we want to have? Now, we came from a culture at Bear Stearns which was very much an eat what you kill. They were a sales and trading firm. For them, long-term was overnight. They never really liked what we were doing in private equity. And as a result of that, we knew we didn't want that culture. We wanted a culture of inclusion where everyone helped each other, people worked together, and everyone would be paid whether you worked on a transaction or you didn't work on it, whether you were based in our San Francisco office where George was, or in New York where Jerry and I were. It didn't really matter. It didn't matter if you were a partner or not a partner. Everyone would be able to participate. And the reason was very simple. We wanted it such that everyone would help each other. So that if I called you, Steffen, and as you know, this is how it went. If I called you because you had some particular expertise in an area, you'd say, I'll be there tomorrow. How can I help? As opposed to if you're only paid on what you work on, it may very well be, gee, I'd like to help you, but I'm a little busy right now. I can't participate. Our culture today, 47 years later, is identical to the culture that we started with. The only difference is today we have 2,500 people. We have about $510 billion of assets under management. We have 26 offices around the world, et cetera. But that culture is inculcated in every single operation at the firm, every location at the firm, and in effect, everything we do. You have to talk about the culture over and over again. I'll never forget one of our senior advisors, George Fisher, the first time I decided to get up and speak to the firm about culture. And we'd never really spoken about it, but people at the firm knew what it was because we hired on that basis. And I went through what our culture was, which our culture is very simple. It was to create a firm where everyone worked together, that our word is our bond, that we're out for the betterment of all of our stakeholders, and that could be across the board. Our clients come first. How can we do a better job of servicing anyone that has entrusted capital to KKR? How can we make a company better than when we found it and improve the operations? These are all things that we feel if you're going to work together in a collaborative form, we will be much better at it. And so today, that's exactly how we are. And we will never, ever vary from that as long as this firm's in existence.
Thanks for these insights, Henry. And I can only say as a testimonial, this is really what KKR lives and not just teaches. It's really inherent in every individual.
Well, it's something because as you know, having been here for a long time, you understand when we say, let's use the whole brain, let's connect the dots, meaning find the information wherever it is and with whatever expertise is in the firm and bring it to the forefront.
Look, Henry, KKR has done so many incredible deals, but in private equity, as in every other industry, sometimes things don't go according to plan. This is why I want to ask you, is there one particular investment, and I know you will say I've done hundreds, but one investment you would highlight that fundamentally shaped your thinking around how to do deals?
Well, you have to understand how we started the private equity industry. And by the way, we didn't go out to create an industry. We just wanted to buy companies, make them better. And lo and behold, it became an industry with a lot of others that jumped in. Quite frankly, Steffen, I liked it better before we had all those other people that have jumped into the business. But it's what it is today. And so I don't think there's a country or a bank that doesn't participate in private equity in one form or another. But let me mention one company. And it's a company called CHI, which is an overhead door manufacturer. And the reason I'm going to mention this one out of many, many that we've done is because when we started private equity, the idea was to have an alignment of interest between the management of the company and the shareholders being us and the institutions that gave us capital. This particular company, when we bought it now about 8 years ago, and it has since been sold, we said to all of the workers at the company, truck drivers, carpenters, people working on the plant floor doing other things, we said to them that we're going to give you a certificate. And this certificate, just put it away, and hopefully when we either go public with the company or we sell the business somewhere down the road, should be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of about $15,000 extra to each one of you over and above your salary, your bonus, etc. Fast forward, we owned the company for 7 years. We sold the company to Nucor, which is a specialty steel business. And at the time that we announced the deal, we called everybody together. all the workers, both on Zoom calls and in the plants. And we said to them, those of you that have been with the company since January of last year, which is a 5-month period, we sold the company May of last year, you're going to get $20,000. That was versus the 15 that we had told everybody they thought they would get. However, if you've been with the company since the beginning, meaning 7 years from the time we bought the company, each of you will get $800,000. Now, that has a huge impact on all of the workers. It has a huge impact on the communities where CHI Overhead Doors operates. And we said to them, we're going to help you think through the planning of your windfall here. But by the way, we did not call it a windfall because you deserve it. You worked. You very much were part of the operation that made the success that we have. And we are a big believer in everyone owning the equity, just like the top management would or KKR might. So today, that's had a huge impact on me personally and on others at the firm. And the reason is that we took that model when we first did it, and we said we're going to roll it out to many of our companies because there's no reason that the workers should not be owners just like everyone else in the top management. And so we set up something called Ownership Works, and we have that now, which we will put that into all of our companies in the U.S. We're rolling it out to Europe now as well. And so we're in approximately 30 companies to date, and we have given value to over 50,000 non-senior employees to date, giving them these kinds of certificates. And so this is a very important, and this I'm personally proud of, that we're able to make such a difference in people's lives.
And Henry, then the same philosophy you and George applied when you IPO'd KKR. Everyone got a stake. I, of course, still remember in the firm, it was broadly distributed, and it was really uniting a group of people under a common purpose. Look, we know each other since 20 years or so now. So allow me to ask you a personal question. You have achieved so incredibly much professionally, financially, privately. You are very active in charity. You're giving back. How do you define success for yourself today? And how does that competition or that definition, compares to when you started KKR?
Well, you have to understand, when we started KKR, there was no one doing what is now known as private equity. In those days, it was called bootstrap acquisitions. And so a lot has changed dramatically. So to me, success is very simple. Success is helping others. It could be helping the pensioners whose pension fund we have responsibility for investing. It could be helping individuals have a better life because they chose to invest with KKR. This is very important to us. Are we making companies better than when we found them? And if we can, yes, then that I would call success. Yes, just to do another deal, that's all fine. It's nice. But the way George and I and Joe and Scott and others here at the firm really measure success is, yes, are we helping other people? Are we getting the returns that we are supposed to get for people that have entrusted their capital with us? And if we are doing that, then yes, that I would call success. One of the things, and you mentioned it when you were just describing a little bit about me, that I thoroughly enjoy, and that is, some people call it giving back to society. I have done this for years. My father and mother taught me this at a very young age, help people that are in need. And I love that. I love helping people and doing what I can to make their lives better. And so That's, to me, is what I would call a success.
Thanks for this, Henry. You mentioned, the early days and how the private equity industry has changed since then. And being an entrepreneur myself, let me ask you the following question. As a pioneer of private equity, and of course you have shaped the entire industry, did you and George realize when you started the firm or a couple of years after how transformative it would be what you were doing and would become for the entire investing world?
Steffen, you have to understand that when we started the firm in 1976, all we wanted to do was be able to last long enough to do 1 or 2 or 3 deals in a 5-year period. That was our objective. And so you understand that we went out to raise our first fund after we left Bear Stearns, and there we were out on our own, and George had 3 children. I had 3 young children as well. And we had no job and no money. And so we just wanted to do some deals. So we went out actually to raise our first fund of $25 million. And the very funny thing about $25 million, it's sort of a rounding error today. But in those days, that was a lot of money, 1976. And so the idea was, let's go to the institutions that we knew because we didn't know where else to go. And so we found one individual that gave us $12.5 million. He was the original money behind Kleiner Perkins. I'd read about him. His name was Henry Hillman down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we went to see him. And he said, well, this is fascinating. I don't know anything about it. I'd never heard of this bootstrap acquisitions, but it's interesting. And when we left, 5 days later, his right-hand man called me and said, Henry said, I really like those 2 young guys. I want half their fund. And I was very excited. I was on a payphone at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And I thought, wow, we're going to be in business. Well, not so quickly. We didn't know where to raise or how to raise the other $12.5 million. So we went to the Prudential Insurance Company, Massachusetts Mutual, and they were the only 2 of any significance that actually were providing capital, both debt and equity capital for private equity. Because, as I said, we were the only ones doing it. So we would go to them. And so we went to them, said, we're raising this fund. And they said, oh, this is fantastic. You made us a lot of money on individual deals. No problem. We'll give you the other $12.5 million. And the but was, we want to be the investment committee. And George and I looked at each other and said, we're not leaving the partnership at Bear Stearns to go work for the Prudential. We really wanted to make our own mistakes and some successes, we hoped, but we had no fun. So when you think about the evolution of, was this going to be an industry? We were just trying to get started. And we cobbled together 7 individuals that gave us $50,000 each. One of them took 2 units, Henry Hillman, and that was $400,000. And the other $100,000 that we felt we would need to cover our overhead, which was $500,000, we figured if we bought a company, we get a fee, and that's how we would be able to take care of that. The idea and industry, as you can imagine, never even entered our mind. We were just trying to figure out, could we get started? Could we do a few deals? And could we survive? And we said we need overhead coverage for 5 years. And if we can just get through the 5 years and do a couple deals, we'll be okay. And if we can't do some deals on our own in 5 years, we don't deserve to be on our own. But as an entrepreneur, and you know this, Steffen, you're either going to get through the wall or you're going to get over the wall, but you will get to the other side somehow, some way. And this is very important in any startup or any entrepreneur. But we've never thought far enough out to say, oh, this could become an industry. And that was never in our thinking.
That resonates very much with myself. Of course, we all at Moonfare don't know what the journey will be. but it feels at least that there are transformative potential, or is transformative potential. Let me ask you one and lean on your incredible experience. And one more question about the past in terms of the financial crisis in 2008 and 9. And I still remember this, of course, being with KKR at that point of time. The crisis hit everyone, more or less, including KKR. But you and the firm still managed to emerge even stronger from this crisis. And I would love to hear from you in hindsight, and we might see, other crises, of course, and do see other crises coming our way. In hindsight, what have you learned about investing in downturns?
It's a great question because I think if you're going to be an investor, I start off with saying one thing, that in order to be a top-notch investor, you have to be curious. I've never seen a great investor who's not curious about a lot of things. So that means economies, it means culture, history, etc. So when you get into a downturn, if you've been curious enough and you've done enough studying and reading and so forth, you know that all downturns end eventually, and all great heights come down. Everything comes back to a medium. Nothing stays up forever. Nothing stays down forever. So when we were in the global financial crisis, and none of us at KKR had ever seen anything as bad as that. We weren't around in the 1929 crisis, but what we said to everyone, focus on what you can control. Now, that's a very important statement because there's a lot of noise in the system. Everybody is worried about this, that, and the other. Every single morning, noon, and night on the television, there's discussions about the banking system is going to implode and disappear, etc. It's enough to scare anyone. And so there's not much that individuals in general can do about it, but focus on the things that you actually can control. And in our case, we said to everyone, those companies where you have responsibility, just make very certain that you take as much cost out of the companies as you can. Make sure that you're ready as soon as the market turns, and it will turn. And when it turns, there's a high likelihood it'll turn pretty quickly. As far as the credit markets are concerned, be ready to refinance your debt and push it out as far as you possibly can, even if it's at a higher rate for the time being, because then you can refinance later on. And so that was what helped us get through the global financial crisis. Now, having said that, it wasn't all on one side playing defense. We play offense too. Crisis is often said create opportunity, and we're huge believers in that. And I'll give you an example. So you had the global financial crisis in the U.S. first. No one was fully prepared for that, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you, Steffen, that, oh yes, we were prepared for that, and not at all. We weren't any more prepared than anybody else for that matter, but we knew that someday we would come out of it. We didn't know if it was 6 months or a year or 2 years, but we knew we would come out. So we said, let's get ready, because when we come out, we're going to have enormous opportunity to put money to work. So once the global financial crisis was under control in the United States, what came next? Well, you know it. You live in Europe. And in Europe, the global financial crisis hit later. And there you had 5 countries in particular that were really under enormous stress, whether it be Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece. And so I made a decision that I would go spend time in Spain, because everyone said, oh, Spain's going to go into the ocean, never to be seen again. I didn't believe it. And so I went and spent time with corporate leaders, government leaders, including the prime minister, the finance minister, the man that the prime minister had put in charge of going to a good bank, bad bank structure like we had done in the U.S. And I found out fairly quickly that actually what they had done was really smart, and they copied the U.S. plan. That's exactly what happened in the U.S. You went to good bank, bad bank. Once you move the bad assets out, the good bank could raise capital on the outside, which is what it did. And interestingly, in the U.S., yes, every financial institution practically was given capital by the U.S. government, but the government made money on every single investment that they made in the financial area, whether it was giving well over 175 billion to AIG, the insurance company, or plenty of money to all of the banks individually. They actually made money because, like I said, you come out of this eventually. Well, in Spain, I figured out after spending enough time there that no, they're not going to fall in the ocean, and this is a real opportunity. So I came back and met with our executive committee, and we concluded, let's back the dump truck up. Let's put as much money into Spain as we possibly could. We put a lot of money in. In my view, we didn't put as much as I had hoped we would because we probably moved slower than we should, but it's what it was, and we did very well. So that's the way people have to think, in my view, when you get into turmoil. If everything is perfectly flat, that's a tough way to invest. If things are going straight up, yes, you can get on the train and you'll think you're pretty smart and things will look fine and you'll do okay for a while. But it's when you have uncertainty. It's when you have to have the courage of your own convictions, and you're not going to hit the bottom exactly right. You're not going to hit the top exactly right, but it doesn't matter. It's directionally, are you doing the right thing?
Yeah, look, and the same philosophy you applied post-COVID. We published a little piece about the most active deal makers out there in the world, and I think KKR was on top of it very, very soon. A few weeks, and no one could see how long and what that would lead for or to. So many, many examples in history. Let me talk a little bit, Henry, about important...
Before you move on, I'm going to just say,
of course,
you raised an interesting period in time that we were ready for a COVID. We didn't know COVID was going to happen. Nobody knew COVID was going to happen. But what we knew was we'd gone over 120 months of uninterrupted growth in GDP in the U.S. And as I said, trees never grow to the sky. So we said, let's get ready. There will be a downturn. Something will happen. And in this case, the happened to be COVID. And we said, let's get ready. Let's go out and meet as many companies as we can so that we are ready when and if there is a downturn. And that's exactly what happened. And so we put enormous amount of money to work. And that's why you said what you did, where you saw who put the most money to work during that period of time. We did put a lot of money to work. Now we have to make very certain that it all works out.
Allow me to talk a little bit, Henry, about skill sets needed in private equity. And you have worked and have seen so many CEOs, and of course, we both and the audience knows how important, the leadership is. What are the top 3 skills you could think of CEOs of portfolio companies really must have or you value most?
Well, it's interesting. When I'm personally interviewing a candidate to be a CEO, a male or female, I'm looking for a couple things. Number one, I want to hear, did they talk about their team? Because none of us, I don't care who we are, get to the top or build a terrific company without a team. Or is that person only talking about themselves? I did this, I did that, and you never hear them talk about the team. So that's one. Second thing I'm looking for is, do they have humility? And do they have EQ? Because too many people, they may be the smartest one around, but the problem is they want you to know they're the smartest person in the room. And that to me is a disaster. That's a typical recipe for failure there. I believe that people have to be good listeners. If you're going to be leading a team, you have to have followers. So if you're going to have followers, what's the point of having followers if you're not going to listen to them and encourage them to come up with ideas, to speak up, to make sure they're not afraid of you, but rather, hey, we're all in this together. We're a team, and we're going to build whatever we're going to build it together. And each of us have a position to play, a role to play, and we will make sure that together we can get there. They also have to be very willing to take feedback. All too often, and I'm sure you've seen this in your experience, CEOs are not good at accepting feedback. They think they have all the answers. Well, none of us have all the answers at all, and it just doesn't happen. And then last thing I would say, or several last things. One, they have to be a good communicator. They have to communicate, and we hear all the time this cliche about they have to be able to set a strategy. That's true, but they have to communicate it. I've seen a lot of people, they say great strategies, but they don't know how to get it across. In the military, generals will tell me that you can't command somebody to go to war. You have to make sure they buy into whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Well, exactly the same thing is true, in my view, at a company. And that's how we've always run KKR. That's how we encourage any one of our 150 or so portfolio companies, the CEOs, to operate so that they bring the team along. And lastly, and this is a given in my view, they have to be ethical. That we will not tolerate if they're not ethical. That will last 32 seconds and they're out. And I believe very strongly that they have to have a complete and thorough buy-in and understanding of civic issues that are important. They have to understand sustainability. They have to understand what's the right thing for their communities, how to make their communities better than when they found it, when they came in as a CEO. And so you take all of these things together, and that to me is in part, there are other things too, but Steffen, that makes for a great CEO.
Look, Henry, I witnessed it personally. I still remember, I think it was 2006 or so, and you came over to the London office and you met a couple of, guys and people from KKR through the ranks, and I was one of them. And we had half an hour and you were asking questions, and you were taking notes. I still remember this. So it resonates very much. By the way, technical thing, we are running a few polls during these deal talks to make them more engaging. There should be 3 or so windows popping up. So please engage and cross what your opinion is very much appreciated from our end. Look, let me ask probably a difficult one. Since private equity involves so much negotiation, tactics, and power, and it's so important for the outcome of a deal, where we are starting and talking here about the art of deal making, is there any example, of a technique or, a tactic that you have applied that had a significant outcome on a deal?
So let me say this, because I believe this so much, that people do business with people they like and trust. That's an underlying fundamental. You may be the smartest, the greatest tactician, negotiator, whatever it is. But if your people you're doing business with don't trust you or don't like you, the rest of it really does not matter at all. And so we start with that. Secondly, go build relationships, because there's going to be difficult times in a negotiation. And go build the relationship with the CEO and build it way before, if you can, before you even get to the point of a negotiation over a particular deal. Years ago, up until 2004, KKR was a pure private equity firm. That's all we did. We had U.S. private equity and we had the European private equity. In 2004, we got into credit. In 2005, we expanded into Asia. And today, we have over 45 different products, and they range all the way from private equity, growth equity, core private equity. We have real estate and different kinds of real estate products. We have infrastructure products and different ones, core and other. We have every kind of credit imaginable, so up and down the capital structure, and then we have impact investing, we have climate investing, and today KKR has, everyone at the firm has a toolkit. And this comes back to the culture that I talked about, where we all work together, we share. And I say that everyone has a toolkit. And what I mean by that is that when we go to see someone, the way it used to be, somebody in the team would walk in and they'd see the CEO and they'd say to her or to him, about the second sentence after meeting him for the first time, is your company for sale? And the CEO would say, well, thank you very much, my company's not for sale. And then they wouldn't know what to talk about. Fast forward, and we changed all of that. And today, it's go and spend the time and get to know the CEO, find out what it is that makes that person tick, find out what they may need down the road. Do they need to refinance the balance sheet? Do they need to sell off some excess real estate? Do they want to make an acquisition where they don't have the capital because the banks aren't covering them anymore? And we want to get ourselves into a position where we can be able to help that CEO, to help that company, no matter what it is that they need. So you ask a specific question about negotiation. It's all part and parcel. It's build that relationship. We've ended up getting or having the opportunity to buy companies which were in an auction there where we weren't necessarily the highest bidder, but we built that relationship with the CEO and with the board. They wanted to make sure that the deal would get done and that it was their company was going into the hands of people they could trust, that they liked, and that they wanted to build a longer-term relationship with. If you hadn't spent that time, it's very important. But the specific answer in a negotiation, I believe two things. One, you have to be a good listener. You've got to listen. What is it that's driving the other side? What is it that why they keep asking for certain things? And then secondly, you have to understand what are their goals and listen to what do you want to accomplish? Not just what I want to accomplish, but what do you on the other side, if we're to get together, accomplish? And lastly, I always talk about this, and that's called partnership, because I don't say that you are just selling your business. You are partnering with KKR. You will become a long-term partner with us, and that means no, you're not just dealing with with Steffen Pauls when was at KKR. You're dealing with the whole firm. Steffen's the leader of this deal, but you will have the opportunity to deal and have access to anybody and everything at the firm. So we look at that as a real partnership. That to me cuts through a lot of the point-to-point negotiation. And by the way, you can't win every point. You shouldn't win every point. You have to make sure that they go away the other side and said, I got a fair deal or a good deal, just like you say, I got a good deal. And lastly, I will not tolerate this. I've had this happen a few times, and that is where somebody wants to change the deal once we have a handshake. To me, you have a handshake, you got a handshake. It's done. Okay, there's nothing more to talk about. Unless something changes tremendously. Otherwise, no, nothing has changed. You agreed on a price. We agreed on the price. Let's go forward on that price. That I've had many times where CEOs or people will come back in trying to renegotiate. And that's a very short meeting, by the way. because I won't tolerate it. Just similarly, if one of our younger people, and I've had this happen too, where a younger person at the firm who was not a partner at the firm made certain commitments to a bank and then decided, well, they thought maybe they could make a little better deal and tried to change the deal after the bank had gone out and raised the capital on the terms that they had agreed to before. I've gotten a call from a CEO from a bank, and they said, this is what it is. I said, let me check. I don't know anything about it. I call the person and find out that, yes, he did say that. I said, so why are you changing it? Well, I thought I could make a better deal. The answer is we don't do that here at KKR. Our word is our bond. Our handshake is a handshake, and it means a lot. That's not the beginning of the negotiation. That is the end of a negotiation.
Very impressive, Henry. I would love to spend, the rest of the deal talk just on the art of doing deals. But let me ask you a question that I think many people are concerned right now about the broader economy. And you went through so many economic cycles in your career, including those of high inflation. What do you make out of the current environment? And do you feel it is in any way extraordinary?
This is a strange environment that we're in. Interestingly, when we went through COVID, and I can speak to the U.S. in particular, although I travel all over the world constantly, but in the U.S., I think the government made a mistake. They gave all the money during COVID to individuals, as opposed to what they did in France and some other countries where they gave most of the money to the company to keep the people employed and to pay them that way. Because what happened is a lot of people in the U.S., I believe, lost their skills, lost their incentive to come into work, etc. And they, by the way, in many cases, if you're a middle income or lower, you were actually making more money not working between the money the government gave you for COVID and the money that you got from unemployment insurance. So we have to work through this excess savings. We're up to about $2 trillion. I'd say today, best estimates that we're at about, in the U.S., about $1 trillion still of savings that are in the hands of people. People are spending it. The consumer is much stronger today than we had seen. You have today a tale of two worlds. You have on one hand your experiences and service world, a part of the economy, and then you have the goods manufacturing and so forth. The goods manufacturing has come down, inflation has come down, and it has slowed down. Whereas on the experiences side and on the services side, as you know, airlines are at records, hotels are full capacity today, restaurants, etc., all because the reason for it is that people want to go out. They've been locked up for 2 years and they want to now experience things. So that is something different than we've seen historically here at KKR or in the U.S. Secondly, this has been more of the inflation has been as high as it's been in years. And so, and in large part, I think we have a structural issue that will stay for a while, and that is on the labor side. You have food prices, energy prices, and transportation, other things, rent and so forth, are coming down now. That's fine. What's not coming down is still a shortage of getting talented workers to get back to work. And as long as that's the case, you will see a pressure on wages. And so wages, I think, will stay up for some time. Now, it's not a today's issue. It will become very quickly a today's issue, in my view, and that is AI. AI will start to have an impact and help a lot with those companies that rely on a lot of routine processes that they don't have to have the individual, that AI can handle a lot of that going forward. I think that will be helpful. You have another thing in the U.S. that will keep inflation high for a while, and that's the transfer to renewable energy. So our infrastructure bill that President Biden put in, in general, a good idea, but it's inflationary because it's just more money going into the system, and that in and of itself is somewhat inflationary. The other thing is that the capital markets have been very tight right now, basically very little going on. You've seen what happened to 3 or 4 of the banks, including Credit Suisse in Switzerland, but SVB and Signature Bank and First Republic here all gone today. What does that mean? Well, that means that many other banks have really tightened their lending criterion, and as a result, it's harder for companies today to find capital. As a result, people like ourselves and others that have large amounts of private capital to put to work, private credit in particular, our business is very good because we're in the business of lending. We have capability. We can do that. What's happened is when you think about the capital markets business, IPOs for equity, high yield, and other types of credit offerings, publicly traded offerings, has shrunk. It was in 2021, you had 8.4% of GDP was these kinds of things. Last month, it was 1.3%. So you've gone down significantly. Will it stay here forever? No. It will start to come back up at some point, but it has gone in a 2-year period. It's down 700 basis points. So that just means lack of liquidity. To date, we don't have a lot of credit issues. It's more a liquidity issue than it is credit issue. But I believe what's coming is we will start to have some credit issues, particularly in the commercial real estate area, which is there's a lot of commercial real estate loans that have to be refinanced that are coming due. And I hear stories all the time now of companies that are just turning the keys over to the creditors and say, here, it's yours because the value, there's no equity value left and we can't afford to take care of the debt. So we're going through an interesting time. The bottom line of this, in my personal view, is that we'll slow roll into some kind of a recession, not deep, not long, but a recession. Maybe it's the last quarter of this year, 2023, and in the first half of next year. I think you're not going to see us start to come out of all of this sort of malaise, if you want to call it, until you get into the second half of 2024. So basically a year from now, you should start to see some turn.
Thank you, Henry, for all these insights. You know this, the private equity industry, as it called it, goes retail. And our mission at Moonfare is to make private equity more accessible, not only to the rich and to the larger institutions, but really to call it ordinary people with a purpose to create more prosperity for these people. What are your views on this, movement? Many, products are being launched of democratization of private equity. And related maybe to what you just said, would you still say it's a good time to invest despite all the factors that you have just laid out?
The answer is yes and no. It depends what region. It depends which industry. What's happened, interestingly, is you have interest rates are very high relative to where they've been, significantly higher, obviously, and that's because of inflation. And yet the price in the public markets hasn't come down. The stocks haven't come down as much as I would have thought that they would. So you're sort of caught in between. And if you talk to CEOs of companies, say, look, I'd love to take my company private, but the reality is that, I'd have to get such and such a price. I said, well, it's not worth it. Where you're trading today is really what the company is worth. So you haven't crossed that divide yet. You have to get over to that where the prices come down. People start to think it's a good time to put money to work. Now, having said that, we are still putting money to work much more carefully than we did in the past. You can never pick the bottom, as I said earlier, just like you can't pick the top. So you have to roll into, if you make a decision that you want to be in investing in the alternative space. And when I'm talking about alternatives, Steffen, that means private equity, growth equity, venture capital, infrastructure, and real estate. So if you made that decision, and there's no reason, in my view, that individuals should not have the same access to the private markets that institutions have. And Moonfare and others are certainly able to provide that. So, for example, we've started at KKR now our democratized products, we'll call it, which means that we will offer the same products that we sell or that we place with the institutions to individuals. And so if someone wants to invest in private equity or growth equity, they can do that. They can now buy a product that we offer or products that you offer. We might put them through your system there. Same with infrastructure, the same with real estate. And so, and you might say, why now? Why is this becoming interesting and important today? And it's in large part because there's an increasing correlation between stocks and bonds, and they both have sort of moved more or less the same. And so if you want enhanced returns and if you want some alpha, you need to diversify and put some of your portfolio into an uncorrelated type of company where, like when we buy a company, and you've heard me say this to you, oftentimes people will congratulate us and say, oh, that's really fantastic. I say, don't congratulate me when we buy a company. Any fool can make an investment, just pay enough. The harder part is, what do you do to make it a better business? That's what you want as an individual to participate in, that ability to ride along with people that are in there and making companies better.
Thanks so much, Henry. Unfortunately, we are approaching the end of our Deal Talk session, but I don't miss to ask you one question that I'm always asking in these Deal Talks. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
One piece of advice. Several things. There's a sentence that I like to tell young people. I said, take out of your vocabulary, I wish I had. That term, I wish I had. Too many people are afraid to take the chance. They're afraid to take a calculated risk. They're afraid of failure. Believe me, you wouldn't have gotten to where you got to. I wouldn't have gotten to where I got to, nor would George Roberts, if we weren't prepared to fail. And I don't want to ever look back and say, oh, I wish I had done that. I'm not in that position. I've taken those chances, and as luck would have it, and a lot of hard work, we've been successful. So that's number one, I would say. Secondly, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. Too many people want to stay where they're comfortable. They want to be with friends like themselves. They want to only do things that they feel comfortable with. Listen to other people's opinions, totally different than yours, and don't rush to judgment until you have listened to what they have to say. And you may, oddly enough, you just might change your thinking. That's great. So a couple of those things like that are important. And lastly, I would say, as a young person, don't be afraid to speak up. I like to say to our younger people, there are no dumb ideas. Just some ideas are better than others. George and I sort of always taken the view, throw enough stuff up, something will stick. And we're going to try things all the time. So as a young person, go give it your best. Try things that you're not necessarily comfortable with, but you've done your homework. And now don't leave one foot on the dock and one foot in the boat. you either have to make a decision. You're going to stay on the dock, and that's fine. You'll miss an opportunity, or you're going to get the boat. And if you get in that boat, row as fast as you can to get across the river.
Henry, let me thank you so much on behalf of the Moonfare community, on behalf of the audience and Moonfare and myself for all these terrific insights in this extraordinary deal talk. And to the audience, thanks so much for making the time and joining us. Please stay healthy. And of course, we would be delighted if you will join us also for the next deal talk in a couple of weeks to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Steffen. Nice to be with you.
Thank you, Henry.